now. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and kids. I wish I can get some kids out there attention. I don't have that age group usually that listens to my show. I got more men than I do women listening to my show, so I have to change that. I'm not, it's not that I'm a gender bender type of guy. That's not me. But you're listening to Dave Emmons and the Strange Reality Show, and I have a guest tonight. And actually, the world is like we've been talking about the last two shows. We're getting into spirituality, consciousness, and that type of thing. And we have a lady tonight, Dr. Rita Louise. And I know a lot of people know her just by mentioning her name. And that's how I got to know her. And I'm gonna keep a lot of anything that politics or anything. Of course, if you hear me say this is for entertainment purposes only, that's what I'm talking about. So the platform doesn't gig me for that. And Dr. Rita Louise is the founder of the Institute of Applied Energetics and a former host of Just Energy Radio. She is an author of the books Dang, It Was Me All Along, and that's her new book, and we'll be talking about that. The Dysfunctional Dance of the Empath and Narcissist, Stepping Out of Eden, E.T. Chronicles. Oh, the E.T. Okay, that's getting in my neck of the woods. What myth and legend have to say about human origin? I like that topic. Avoiding the cosmic 2x4, Dark Angels, an insider's guide to ghost spirits and attached entities, and The Power Within, a psychic healing primer, as well as hundreds of articles that have been published worldwide. She is also the producer of a number of full-length and feature videos. Dr. Rita has appeared on film, radio, television, and has spoken at conferences around the world covering topics such as health and healing, relationships, ghost, intuition, ancient mysteries, and the paranormal. Man, this is going to be fun. Dr. Rita's extended bio, click here, headshot, click on the image for a full-size version, right click to say, oh, I'm thinking about Biden.
I know, I'm thinking, pause.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. For entertainment purposes only. I just got to thinking about Biden, and I kept reading on to the instructions. I'm sorry. Okay, but she's got a Fran Drescher's approach. Anybody remember Fran Drescher? I know a lot of people. This was 80s. I think this was in the 80s. I remember that show really really well. Fran Drescher is delivered without the wine. Is how one audience member put Dr. Rita Louise Frank's funny yet honest approach. Through a powerful synthesis of science and ancient wisdom, her unique insights bridge the worlds of science, spirit, and culture, are changing the way we view our place in the world. Dr. Rita possesses the high caliber of knowledge and experience that organizations demand. She infuses, not refuses. Oh, sorry, Lyle, about that. That's a bad ad. I'm starting to act like the guy I just talked about. She infuses every engagement with both credibility and content. She has the unique ability to deliver a serious message through intriguing stories and her own brand of humor. Dr. Rita Louise, welcome to the show. Glad to have you on here. Heard a lot about you and seen.
I think we are going to have a lot of fun.
Okay. All right. I just started off that little parody about Biden. I feel sorry for the guy. I really do. All politics aside, I feel sorry for the guy. They shouldn't have pushed him as hard as they did. But the policies are the things that I'm concerned about. But politics aside, Dr. Rita Louise, what are you doing now? And what's your goals in the future as we can open up the show?
Why do people ask that? So I only ever do what spirit tells me to do. So, if you say, what's your 5-year plan? I don't know. It's, whatever I'm inspired to do. And most of my friends think that I'm nuts. So I released my new book, Dang, It Was Me All Along, and then turned around and bought a fixer-upper house and have been working on it feverishly.
Really? You're really hands-on stuff, huh?
So what was it yesterday? The day before, I had these tile guys come.
Yeah.
And they walked in, and I had somebody hang the sheetrock, and then I mud and taped and sanded and primed the walls, and they were like, wow, this is really nice because there's no texture. And I'm like, well, thank you. And they looked at me like, you did this? It's like, hell yeah, I did this. They were very impressed. And I'm like,
Uh, Great job. I like that. You know, an independent woman. That's yeah, that's the bold, strong American girl, right?
Well, I have to tell you, one, I was inspired to buy this house. Two, because of where we're at, I had retirement money put away, and I'm like, I'm not putting it in the stock market. That ain't happening.
No.
And I was like, so what can I get other than like silver or gold to invest in? So I started looking at some real estate. And with how crazy the world has been,
Oh,
I find mudding and taping and sanding and lifting staples, a million staples out of the floor, a very meditative experience.
yeah. Yeah.
And it kind of keeps your mind off of thinking about how screwed up our world is right now,
Right.
and kind of keeps my energy clear. And so there really has been this therapeutic healing aspect to it
Right.
also.
Yeah, I that's why I wanted you on the show because we do have a screwed up world. In the last two or three shows I've done, got into spirituality and how to get people lifted up a little bit. And I know with your attitude, you're gung ho on everything you do, and you cover a lot of topics. Wow, is it really quite a few things that I would like to dig into myself. But hey,
Usually people are like, you need to come back for 2 or 3 shows. I mean,
yeah,
that's usually that ends up being the bottom line. So just
right.
pick something and I'll come back because you're already fun. I already like you.
Oh, well, I like you too. I like having fun, having a few laughs. You got to be a little loose when you do this stuff. And as I keep going, I get looser and looser. And I don't swear or cuss. That's one thing I don't do. I might say damn or poop or shit or something like that. I just said it, so I might say that, but that's about it. You know. I mean, even the politicians are saying those words, especially one politician.
Mhm.
I don't want to get political, but yeah, but that it
We all know who it is.
it's a bunch of BS. That's what it basically it is. Dr. Rita, that's what I want to call you. The mystery of psychic abilities revealed. How does a person recognize they have the power of intuition or psychic abilities? Can you start
Okay.
with that?
I can sure start with that.
Okay.
And so there are many people who believe that there are only so certain people that have intuitive gifts or psychic abilities or whatever. But I believe that everyone has that ability. But doing psychic work is kind of like dancing or doing art. You
Mm.
can be Leonardo da Vinci or Fred Astaire and just be wonderful. And you can get some training and be even better.
Uh-huh.
Or you could be kind of like me. You could draw little stick people. Like I can dance pretty good, but or you could be that person that they just have their hands in their pockets and they're tapping, but they're not even tapping and beats the music. You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
and so and having psychic abilities is that way, that some people are more gifted at it, open, receptive to it. They're the Fred Astaire's of the psychic
Yeah.
world.
Right.
And
I
then other people not.
Yeah, I have, sometimes I don't know. I guess I look at the psychic abilities a little differently. I think we do. We all have an innate ability to do that. And it's just like me trying to prove to my wife that I got psychic abilities. I drive up to an Italian restaurant in front of it and I'll sit there and park. I said, I think you got Italian food on your mind tonight for dinner. And she looks at me and she looks at the restaurant. She says, I guess I do now. I said, does that make me a psychic? So no,
But many people have psychic abilities and they never connect the dots. They
right,
never recognize that when I think this thing, or when I say this thing, or when I feel this thing, and it turns out to be true, that I was receiving that information from the world around us. Because as human beings, we're designed to send,
right.
receive, and
Mhm.
then process the information from the world around us. So
Yeah,
we all act like television broadcast stations as well as the television. So we're sending our crap everywhere and just leaving it out there for other people to receive. And
right.
we've all had the experience of like walking by someone that has really bad mojo
Uh-huh.
and you're just like, I'm gonna go that way.
Yeah.
Well, it's not that they said anything. It's not necessarily that they're wearing dirty clothes or anything. You can just feel it.
Mhm.
And that feeling is a psychic gift.
Yeah. And I, in combat, like I've been in combat, and actually you're more aware of your surroundings. You're super sensitive to your surroundings. And a lot of times my wife say, "Why are you looking around a lot?" I said, "I always do that." I said, "It's just a habit, hypersensitivity and looking at things." I tried to find out, first of all, if I know the person that's coming in the room. Second of all, are they dangerous? Are they negative? Like the bad mojo that you're talking
Mhm,
about. And there's a guy at the gym, to bring a local story here. I go to the gym and there's some really muscular guys there, and I work out too quite a bit. But there's a guy that walks around and he's about 6'3", 6'4", and he doesn't talk to anybody, and he does some weights and he walks around the gym, and he's just like he's mad. And I said, I don't think I want to mess with that guy. You can just feel it. There's an intensity in certain people. And if you go to
mhm.
a nightclub, and like I've been with my brothers and my family, you go in a nightclub listening to band, since I've been a musician most of my life. But I'd go in there and I'd see these people that look like they can cause some trouble. I say, I'm out of here. I don't want no part of this. This is going to get deep. Is that kind of a psychic ability, Dr.
I
Rita?
would say so.
Yeah.
But for most people, the other piece of it is we receive this information, like you were receiving that information and you were saying, yeah, this isn't feeling good to me, so I'm out of here. But many people overrule what they're feeling, or this image they might get in their head, or a voice communication like, oh, maybe you should take a sweater. It's like, and then you don't, and then you go to work and it's freezing, or you go to the
Right.
mall and it's freezing. Um, and that tends to be more the case with people, is that they're receiving the information, so so they're psychic enough to receive the information, but they just overrule it and don't pay any attention to it. And so I always challenge people that it doesn't matter if you listen to it or not. I just want you, as a first step, as that baby step, to go, okay, I'm at work and I'm freezing, but this morning I was thinking about taking a sweater and I didn't take it,
Mhm.
and start connecting those dots of, if I had this thought or I had this feeling, whether you listen to it or not, whether you pay attention to it or not, you know, and this was the outcome. Because usually if you pay attention to it, it's usually a positive outcome. If you
Mhm.
don't pay attention to it, then it
Right.
is, it it may be okay, but it could be better.
Yeah. And you say to yourself at the end of it, if you was thinking this and then something did happen, and you say, dang, kind of like your book.
Yeah.
Yeah. I, I
Always,
I missed
always.
this. I missed it, but I was in my mind, but I didn't say it. It didn't come off my tongue. So what, like we talk about, does manifestation work in with psychic abilities, Dr. Rita?
As in, like, law of attraction manifestation.
Yeah, like for, you know, gain of riches and power and things of that nature, or is it just hard work?
So this is my understanding, and that's one of the chapters in my DAG book, is all about law of attraction. And this was what I gleaned, because they really don't talk about, like, I'm a very straightforward person,
Mhm.
and I'll just sit there and say, well, this is what you're supposed to do, and not veil it in this whatever, it doesn't make sense, and I don't even know.
Right.
So what I gleaned was, if you have good energy, and if you're not running around with negative thinking, like, you know example, this is one of the stories in the book. So try to start doing psychic development classes, and so I would find this, like, convenient venue, not necessarily a big, it was just like a little conference room kind of thing, because I was just starting it off, and um did the advertising, this, that, the other thing, and it would start off really good, but then my own negative thinking would start to creep in. It's like, well, what if nobody shows up? Well, and you start second guessing yourself. And so now mentally and emotionally and energetically, because you're sending that out,
Right.
you're self-sabotaging your thing. And guess what? Instead of having 500 people show up at the door, I had nobody, because really that was the predominant vibration I was sending out.
Mhm.
And so law of attraction works that way. And I think it's been kind of bastardized with the idea of, I want to get wealth and I want to get power, because wealth and power are ego based,
Right. Yeah, that's true.
versus I'm just having good energy and I'm having a good connection with the divine or source or the universe or whatever. And I'm just running, being clear. I'm being a clear channel for the universe to work through.
Right.
And I feel like that's really the secret, but that's really kind of a big nut for a lot of people to get. And so they tell you, make a vision board and do this and repeat 3 times, Beetlejuice, 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 and you'll get $1 million. I
Mhm.
don't know. Hasn't ever worked for me.
No,
Uh,
it doesn't work, and it doesn't work for me. I see people who say, "Well, just manifest. If you want riches, or if you want this, or you want this big multi-million-dollar home, manifest it. Think about it every day when you wake up." And I
but
thought,
do they have the multi-million-dollar home and the fancy car?
no, not really. Most,
So they suck at it too. So um, now what I have noticed, because I wrote that book because I had a lot of negative thinking, and I just didn't want to do it anymore. And then I like learned the secret of the secret. And what I have noticed is that when I'm trapped in a cycle of negative thinking, like, I'm so much better. I am so much a happier person every day. But we all have days, I call it bad brain, where you have bad brain,
no.
and you just are having a hard time getting out of your own way.
Mhm.
And what I've noticed is, on days that I have bad brain, crappy things happen.
Right. It does. Things
You
do.
know, and I just am like, okay, so if I can make it so crappy things don't happen, I may be okay with that.
Right. I don't I don't know if it's my age or not, Dr. Rita, but if I get distracted and I got like 3 things I need to do, and I need to take these 3 things from the house and take those 3 things somewhere else, and if I get distracted by somebody, either, talking to me and throwing me off my thinking, then I sometimes forget things, and I said, "Oh, I shouldn't do that. I shouldn't take in and let the distractions, take over my thinking and what I'm supposed to do." Is that age, or is that just, having too many? It's not. Well, I know us guys, we're not multifaceted, but
I would like to say that, the energy on the planet the last couple few years since COVID, I'm going to put it square at COVID, since COVID has taken a huge detour, and people have really not emotionally and energetically recovered. And people are just have this underlying layer of stress. And so, like, keeping stuff in your brain, like, I make piles. If I'm taking stuff to people's houses and it's more than one thing, I get my little plastic supermarket sack and I put it in the sack, and then I put the sack next to my purse.
right,
Or if it's stuff in the refrigerator, it's all sacked up. So all I have to do is remember to open the refrigerator and it's all sacked up. Or my calendar, it's like, you know, take the paint out of the car. That was literally a Monday morning task, because I bought paint on Sunday afternoon, and I was taking it to the house I'm working on, but it was in the car, but it was in the back seat. So I could see myself leaving it in the car for forever.
mm,
Take paint out of car. I'm like, okay. So I don't know if it's an age thing, or, it's been pretty overloaded lately. I think our brain synapses have been just
true.
overloaded. And it's like, no, not one more thing.
Yeah. They keep talking about we're going through a reset, and the Mayan calendar And in 2012, they said that was the end of the world as we know it, through a reset. And now I feel like I'm going through a reset because I feel it going from the third dimension, like to the fifth dimension. Are we moving that way? And the earth is, and things are just crazy. And I guess frequencies are really hitting us and causing us to think, there's a lot of people don't do anything. You said, I think you mentioned that a while ago, that you don't go, a lot of people don't go out and hardly do anything anymore. And they kind of stick to themselves and their grandkids and their families. They don't party like they used to. I know I used to be a musician, so I had a lot of friends who would go out and party, but that doesn't go on anymore. That doesn't happen anymore. There's not
Hmm.
many good times. Maybe the younger people do it, the ones that are under 25, not married with family. They might get out and have fun. Dr. Reed, is that how you see it? I know you mentioned that virus, and a lot of times they don't like that word mentioned, so that we're just say that
Hmm.
entertainment purposes only. So,
Yes.
yeah, but
Okay. Um, I mean, I feel like that whole scenario created trauma in people,
yes,
and no one really wants to talk about the trauma that people were inflicted with, and the level of fear that you walked around with every day.
right,
And even if you weren't in fear, like personally in fear, like I would like, if I get it, I get it. I know I'm not going to die. I was totally not worried. And if I died, oh well,
yeah. I
I'm
started.
out of here.
Yeah, yeah. You're going from one body to another body, another dimension, whatever, and that's probably a
Mhm.
better life after this. We might get into talking about that, what you see there. Uh, but
But
yeah,
let me just add this last little teeny piece to that.
right,
And so earlier I was saying that we project our energy out into the world and everybody else can receive it. And there was so much fear being projected on the planet that even if you were a saint on the top of a mountain in a monastery, you were going to feel it
right,
because it was so strong.
yeah.
But people don't recognize that that can have a direct impact on you.
Mhm. Yeah, our psychological health has been taking a hit the last 3 or 4 years. I know a lot of people that have changed. Actually, there's been some changes. The reset has occurred,
Mhm.
and there's a lot of things still that we are worried about. A lot of people are worried about the economy. They're worried about the inflation. They're worried about the crime. They're worried about international problems, the third world war, and they're talking about that all the time. And when we get pounded by that, Dr. Rita, it has a lot to do, we have our own families, we have our own health, we have our own issues, and then we have these outer circles of people we know, and then we have the world and our country. And when that all that goes, it seems like it just squeezes in on you, all of it. And that's where I feel where everything is at right now, Dr. Rita.
And I agree, but I'm going to add one more piece. I feel like, and this is just my opinion, not the opinion of this show or this broadcast network, um, that there that people are being lied to. And if you point out that's a lie, then you're some wackadoodle conspiracy theorist and you're totally dissed. And it's kind of like it's so invalidating to you as a person, but they can say this on one hand, and then but the reality is not what they say. But then it's kind of like, and when you say, but this is the reality, no, it's not. It's like, hello.
Yeah.
I mean, that's called cognitive dissonance. It's like they're gaslighting and we're experiencing cognitive dissonance. And, it's like your head goes spins around. It's like, but I know that this is a fact, but you're saying, no, it's a lie.
Right. And if you look at the
Those
internet,
films have been altered. It's
yeah,
like, what?
yeah. You look at the internet, you hear all kinds of stories, and the best and most stories or most memes or reels or whatever that get all the attention are little kids playing music or are animals farting or something like that, that they get more hits than shows like this or something serious or educational. So they're looking for, I guess, a relief from all this stress by looking at crazy things and something that'll make them laugh. I think we do need more laughter. I think laughter is healthy. I talked about that on the other show, that is a health thing. It laughter will bring you closer to, I guess, joy or inside feelings. And Dr. Rita, you know that you
Hmm.
like a very humorous person, and a person that has a little bit of that comedy inside of you. And I used to do it too, but here lately, like you said, the last 3 or 4 years, wow, it's just zapped me on a lot of that.
Actually, I think I've gotten funnier in the last 3 or 4 years.
Well,
Maybe not, all right, not funnier. I have become more willing to just say it out loud.
yeah,
How's that?
yeah.
Because it's part of that shift. And it's kind of like, you know what? Whatever. Just as long as you don't take my channel down on YouTube, I'm good.
Yeah, I guess I've been slapped a couple of times myself, but talking about, I guess, conspiracies in which people, it all depends on who you talk to, if it's a conspiracy or not. To me, I think most conspiracies have actually come true the last 3 or 4 years. And I think there's light being shined on good against evil. Let's talk about that. Is that what's going on now? It's not so much political, it's good versus evil, Dr. Rita?
I mean, I'm a very spiritual person, but I'm not a very religious person.
Right, me too.
Okay. Um, but where things have been recently make me go, well, you know, it does seem like a possibility of what's going on, where people are talking about ascension or the shift from the third dimension to the fifth dimension, and there's all the world speeds up and I read this years ago and they were talking about good and evil. And the only way that you can sit there and see what good is versus evil is to have the two, so there's the comparison. And I think they were talking about this about as far as like the ascension, and that everyone would ascend because the people that were doing the evil were playing their role in the whole process to identify this polar opposites
Right.
of what was going on.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, it makes sense, but I'm not really liking it right now.
And a lot of times, they actually say this too. I think religions, you mentioned that, and I was a Catholic at one time, and I got a divorce, and I tried to take communion, and the priest slapped me. He said, "You get out of here." And no, he didn't. That's how they felt. You get a divorce, you're bad. You
Oh,
can't.
I went to Catholic school.
Yeah.
I'm feeling you.
But I did take my Catholicism lesson sitting on 3 cases of beer. Because the priest didn't have another chair for me, I just sat on the 3 cases of beer and had some lessons from that. So it's crazy. It's a crazy word. But no, I guess what we're looking at too is the disinformation and the lies that we've been given. And you talk about myth as history, the history of the world based on the mythic record. Could you explain that, Dr. Rita?
Sure. So, so that really is the basis of my book, ET Chronicles: What Myth and Legends Have to Say About Human Origins, which is a jam-packed book, and we could do a whole freaking show. So I'm going to give you the 5-minute
Okay.
synopsis of it.
I'd love to have the whole show.
Um, but basically, well, and like I said, we should just do a whole show just on that topic because there's a lot of material.
Okay.
But basically, when you go and do a comprehensive, and I'm going to say it this way, comprehensive survey of myth from around the world, what you find is that there are certain storylines that are beyond consistent. One of the most consistent stories we find globally is the Noah story. I mean, obviously, it's not Noah, and there's minor details that get changed, but when you place story next to story, there's even a consistency in those.
Right.
Um, And so, but when you take these stories, you can look at what happened prior and what happened after, and literally put together a timeline of the history of the world according to the gods. And it starts with in the beginning, and it goes to basically Noah's flood. And in those stories, it cracks me up, and people have a hard time hearing me share this part. Uh, but they are the stories of the gods. So I'm a god and you're a god, and we're having this conversation, and there's a god over there, and they're taking notes about all the stuff we're talking about.
Mm.
And I'm telling you about my vacation to the underworld, and they're taking notes about my vacation to the underworld. And that's what the stories are, is we're gods, we're hanging out, we're equal, and yeah, there are giants in it, but they're lesser. Humanity is created, but they're lesser because we're the gods. And then after the flood, the narrative shifts, and there's this consistency that you find around the world. But
Mhm.
then after the flood, everything becomes much more local in nature, and the viewpoint of the storyteller changes. And so it goes from me and you, gods, hanging out with another god taking notes, to I'm a human person and I'm having a relationship with God, and God is interacting with me personally. So, you think of Moses. Moses interacted with God,
Mm.
not all the Jewish people, just Moses. In the story of the Trojan horse, Paris has an interaction with the gods that starts the whole thing off. But it's Paris having the interaction. There's specific individuals, Jason and the Argonauts. It's Jason communicating with the gods, not everybody. And there's this surrender. We're like, oh God, help me. Where the other ones are like, what do you want? Come here, come over here, let me smack you, because we're gods and that's what we do.
Yeah.
And it's just really interesting because and you lose the global consistency. And so if you take everything after the flood narrative and throw it away and just look at that, you can tell the story. And there are actually myths like that suggest that we know this history because we were taught it. We were taught the history of the gods,
Right.
that we didn't make it up, which is why the story is so consistent, because it wasn't individual people writing down their history. It was taught to us, just like we learn about Santa Claus and we learn about whatever, and we know what we've learned.
Right. What we're taught in school, and even today, they're changing the curriculum for these little kids in school, in grade school, and that's not good. I think there's been a lot of parents that have been upset about the way their kids are being taught and what they're being taught. So we need to take a look at what we really need when it comes to teaching kids, and that's where it all starts, teaching kids, and they formulate this history. Uh, Outside of that, getting inside what's going on today with schools and kids, we weren't we manipulated by like the Anunnaki and the ETs 60,000 years ago, Dr. Rita, and our DNA manipulated?
So there were multiple periods where our DNA was manipulated. However, I have a big however, because a lot of people like to, the 40,000, 60,000, 100,000 years ago. However, some of the largest changes, in my opinion, were made like a million, 1.5 million years ago. And I bring that to the forefront because one of the old, well, it is the oldest, and also very consistent up there with the flood story myth that we have, is how the gods gave us fire, and the god that gave us fire was punished. So you think of Loki. Loki gave humanity fire, he was punished.
Mm.
Prometheus gave humanity fire, he was punished. Macabo gave humanity fire. He was punished, so you hear of these gods that give humanity fire, and they're always this trickster gods, so it's always like you're talking about the same guy. But here's the but. It is well documented that we were creating like fire pits and hearths in caves 780,000 years ago, with humanity or Neanderthals being able to manipulate fire, at least 1 million years ago, but then they, it got more controlled and they actually, had fire pits, so there's well documented, like, some people are like, oh, well, they don't really know. But, when you have a fire ring in a cave, that's like pretty impressive that they were controlling fire, but they had been using it for a while by that point in time.
Yeah.
And so why would we have a myth of the gods giving us fire that was so ancient if the gods didn't interact with humanity until 60,000 years ago? Because we already had fire for 700,000 years.
Yeah. I wrote a book, Angels and Supernatural Entities, and I got into the angel part of it and got into some of the biblical parts of it. But I'm looking at, like, ancient archaeology has been proving some things. They just found a wagon wheel in a cave or underground that's been there for several million years. And they said that wheel has been that old. And they also found a small hammer in Texas that was something like, what, 1.5 million or 2 million years
Mhm.
old. So we've been here, we've been recycled and recycled, us humans here on Earth. And what I've been looking at is that humans were developed almost 4.5 billion years ago. Our DNA's been around. We've been hopscotching, I guess, across other planets and galaxies. But
But
that's,
see, I'm going to disagree with you because that's not how the story goes.
you know,
Because the story does not have humanity being created. Literally, in my book, it's the second to last chapter. And they're created on Earth, which is why we're so well suited to this planet. Now, there were alien races that were on the Earth, and the alien races created the giants, who were the 7 to 10 foot giants, not the giant, that inhabited the Earth, but then there's us, and we're a pretty recent addition to the whole thing. But again, according to the stories, our DNA was a mixture of indigenous. Now, not that to say that they didn't have a role in the development of animal life on the planet, genetic engineering there, but it was a mixture of indigenous DNA, ape DNA, with alien DNA, their DNA, that created humanity. Lots of stories that suggest that
right.
pretty clearly.
Yeah. That people have also suggested, who was that guy in Canada, was the defense secretary for the Canadian government? He was at a hearing and he said that a lot of the ETs look like us, humanoid, and the
Mhm.
tall whites and the Pleiadians are kind of like humanoid type
Mhm.
ETs, and they are probably the ones who manipulated our DNA into looking. What is it said? God made us in image of
His
it.
image. Mhm.
Yeah. Now, where does that come from? I don't know. It comes from the Bible, but in Genesis. But actually, it could come from like the ETs making us in their image. Is that correct, Dr. Rita?
Okay, so when I think of the God of the Bible, okay, the big G God, as Giorgio Zuccolo says,
Yeah.
you know, and I'm a bit of a Trekkie, so when I talk about certain things, I throw Star Trek references in because most people know what I'm talking about.
Mhm.
And so when I think of an omnipotent God, I think of Q, that character. And when he wants the mariachi band, he snaps his finger and it appears on the bridge. And when he wants to send the Enterprise across the galaxy, he goes, and they're across the galaxy. And there, that's an omnipotent God. And that's what we were taught to believe, that God had that kind of power.
Right.
Well, when you read these stories and they're flying around in Vimana, aerial ships,
Right.
and they have these magnificent weapons that can level mountains and smote cities, it's kind of like, that's not really omnipotent. That's like, there's some alien race, although in my books I say alien once, and the rest of the times I just say the gods, because to the people, they were the gods, and that was, the word that they use. And so, like in Samaria, that was the Anunnaki, the gods, and and you think of you know, anthropologists go into an Amazonian village, I mean, it's changed more now, and they have a lighter and they think it's magic.
Right. It's magic. Yes.
Or, it was during World War II, and they changed the name, but it was New Hybrids. I have terrible phonics skills. And the Americans set up a base because they were fighting the Japanese. Yeah, the Japanese. And so they had an airfield, and planes would come by and they would drop cargo to the airbase. Well, it didn't always get to the airbase. And so the local people learned that, thought that the gods were bringing them these riches, like chocolate bars and stuff.
Mm.
And the gifts of the gods was called cargo.
Okay.
And so then the Americans left, and the gods didn't like them anymore. They weren't getting any more cargo.
Mhm.
And so they made these like airplane looking things out of sticks, and they made air towers, and they took coconut shells to make earmuffs, and they would sit there and do the things that these Americans did, and they would like bring the plane in, and they would do these rituals to get cargo, but the cargo never came. Now, how sad is that story?
Oh,
But if we were an indigenous group and we have this stuff going on around us, what would we think?
no, that was in the South Pacific as an island.
Mm-hmm.
There
Mm-hmm.
are islands in. Yeah, I know that about, like, you take some tribes in Africa, they're imitating their gods, and
Mm-hmm.
they look like ET. They're dressed up in a suit and they got this headgear on, and I can't think of the tribes or whatever, but they imitate the gods that they've seen and were impressed with. And yeah, I believe that the little G gods, yes, they
Mm-hmm.
ETs, and I I just think that history is is something that I keep thinking about, like the Tartarian race, not the race or people, uh, and that their buildings, they were here and then they were gone after a couple of years, like in the world fairs. I don't know why that topic comes up to my mind all the time, and I look at it and I try to study it and try to think about it. I saw a program on TV about it, and it's just weird that these the I guess I'm saying it right, Tartarian people, they were magnificent builders, and they built all these magnificent towers, things that we can't do now architecturally, design wise, and they did it back in the 1800s and early 1900s, and then they tore down all the buildings like they were trying to hide something, the technology or whatever. And I think that things do have, there's a reset. We are only, we're controlled by some sort of a matrix. Can we get into that, a holographic or matrix world, Dr. Rita?
It's not really my topic
It's not
per
your.
se. So, but I just want to make a commentary on what you just said. So I live in a 100-year-old house, and it's a brick house. It's a 18-inch solid brick exterior.
Wow.
And so, everybody's insurance is going up, and I had to renew my policy. So I was shopping it around, and this one guy was like, well, it would cost $600,000 to rebuild your house. And I'm like, there is no way in hell anybody is going to rebuild this house. I'm like, it's a solid freaking brick house with woodwork, wood trim everywhere, like nice hardwood floors. You know what I mean? They're never going to rebuild this house
Yeah.
for any six, maybe a few $1 million, maybe. But they would still want to do a wood frame, and it's like not the same. Sorry.
Right. Yeah. It, there are buildings, and I go through like St. Louis and I see these old buildings over there. I just admire them. I guess it takes me back. It takes my memory back. They say when you leave the third dimension and you starting to, go into the fifth dimension, that you start thinking of your past as a kid, and you go back and you try to remember things. You might even go back to where you started and take a look around and just reminisce. uh, that's part of, I guess, being in a reset for yourself. And I feel that a lot of times, that why am I going back in the past so much and thinking about what happened in the past? And because it's reset, I think that's all part of it, uh, that I feel. And I feel energy sometimes, like I felt energy this morning going through my body. And it's probably something the ET's left with me. Uh, Dr. Rita, you also mentioned myth, underground bases. We're going to jump, I guess, to that extraterrestrial presence underground. My new sci-fi book has a battle with underground aliens, reptilians, and the bad ones. So,
Mhm.
uh, what what have you researched on the underground bases with the ETs, Dr. Rita?
It's so, I always have to caveat with this. So I'm not a contemporary ufologist at all. Not interested, don't care with like, because it's not old. I only like old stuff,
Mhm.
which is why I live in an old house and am working on an old house. And, if it's not really old, then I'm not interested. But, but, you know, one of my personal favorite is conspiracy theories. And the one that, when you first start dating someone, because I always have on my profile, like, talking about a good conspiracy theory. I've always had that on my profile. So I always get well, what's your favorite conspiracy theory? And they're expecting like JFK or, and I'm always like, oh, reptilians that live in underground bases that are controlling the government, and then maybe they come back after that one.
Yeah. Yeah. I do that too. I'll get to talking to people on the internet and they'll ask me, and I'll mention to them, I said, do you know much about, the reptilians and the ETs, underground bases and everything? And then they don't, they said, let's talk about something else,
Yeah, they get real quiet.
Yeah, but
And so what I bring to the table is that the mythic record 100% supports the concept of reptilians living in underground bases. And so there were multiple descriptions of the gods
Mhm.
that come forward. And so one group of them were the fertility gods, and they actually inhabited the earth first. And they were tied to, in Sumerian, it was the watery deep, and their home was in the abyss, which was underwater, and in art, this group. So they're fertility gods. They're associated with being mischievous or not really listening to what the council of gods says, so like they're the ones that gave us fire, that kind of mischievous, like good for us, not so good for them. Um, but when they are described physically, they're often represented as having the upper body of a human and a serpent tail. So you have Kronos in Greek, you have Quetzalcoatl in South America, you have Fuxi and Mua in China, and they all, you sit there and you look at what their deal is individually, and they're all kind of cross, what they do as far as like they're all part of the same team, like, and that was their responsibilities. And so I have put out, and actually, well, I'll put this out and then I'll make a different commentary, that perhaps, everything was based on an oral tradition. And so if the oral tradition said that they were look like, you know, half man, half reptile, maybe that was the easiest way for them to draw them and not have them be like totally weird. Um, but there are actually from like 7,000 years ago that came out of Sumeria and a different time from Sri Lanka figures that look very reptilian and humanoid looking bodies that predate what we consider art.
Okay.
But and they look reptilian. If I could show you a picture, you'd be like, oh, okay. And they're actually figures, and they got like this reptile face. And I'm sure if anybody is interested in the topic at all, they have seen them. How's
Right.
that? You
I
know,
I've I have seen a couple of them, and one of them was in a holographic form, and about 5'7", 5'8", wasn't that really tall, but it looked like a cobra in the face, and it scared me. I was conscious.
Mhm.
I got up out of bed and I looked over in the corner, and there this thing was standing there, and I said, "Oh my God, I don't like cobras because they're deadly." So I looked at that and I thought, oh my, and then it disappeared. So I think they know they scare us because of their looks. They look different than humanoids. But I I think that we have so many ET races out there in this world, in the universes, maybe 11, 12 universes, maybe more, infinity they call it. But then they talk about you know, the earth, the firmament, and all this other stuff that we can't go beyond that. I'm not so sure about that. And the flat earth, these are ideas that are popping up maybe for misinformation or disinformation, you know. But what do you think about those new things they're talking about, flat earth and the Arctic ice wall and you know,
Not much. So when I was doing my podcast, that's when the flat earth stuff really started getting some momentum. And I reached out to I don't know how many flat earth people to come on the show. And I wasn't bringing them on to like diss them. It was like I wanted to hear their thing. I really wasn't interested in like reading their material, but I'm like, but I would have been interested in interviewing them to kind of see what they had to say,
mhm,
you know, but none of them would take me up on it.
right?
And I was a pretty well respected show. So I just think that, they figured that I would just, rattle them or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um,
But no,
but
I
I mean, all right, but as far as like other dimensional beings, even in antiquity, uh, cultural groups would go into a ritual experience in order to connect with these higher level dimensional beings, or, many people interact with ghosts, they're invisible people and sometimes invisible aliens or whatever, they're not in our own time space continuum.
you talk about attached entities, and that's you talk about bad kids of Ghost World, and you just
Uh-huh.
mentioned ghosts, so I just thought maybe I'd bring that up. I haven't really seen a ghost. I think I've heard some noises or things like that, but I think most of my interactions have been with like ETs throughout my life. But I the ghost thing is kind of hard to figure out. Do you have a handle on that, Dr. Rita?
So, so let me ask you a question. So when you've interacted with the ETs, did they always take on ET form?
No, the humanoids, I've met a couple of humanoids, and I met one in Sedona, and which is in my book. And she actually come to my house with two other younger guys, teenagers, and they were Japanese. And so she found out where I live somehow or another. But my cousin was sitting with me on the porch, and they come up to us and they dumbed us down. They utilized some kind of magnetic energy, and I couldn't talk. My cousin couldn't talk.
Oh, interesting.
All we were able to do were just look and observe. And these two had really dark eyes. And the gal that I ran into in Sedona, she was standing down the street from me with her back turned, but I knew it was her. I knew it looked like her, and I knew because I spent an evening with her, and I spent the next day with her going around Sedona, and she was strange. And actually, that's part of the name of my book, we were supposed to meet. That's what she tells me all along throughout the, we met. But there's very confusing, and I found out she was real when she come to my house 5 months later and dumbed us down, and my cousin was scared to death, and he's not a believer in anything like that. He did see a Bigfoot. uh but I try to talk to ETs in my lucid dreams, and I saw a little gray next to my bed one time, and saw that face to face, and I was conscious. I've seen three of them consciously, and about four more, in lucid dreams. And
Hmm.
I think I saw one that was of my race. She was a tall white uh, gal, and she didn't have no hair, and I'm just like her, so, so I must be the tall white, but a little bit shorter, a little bit more dumpier, tall white. But no, I've had some interesting things, and I also saw. I think it was a guardian angel. I don't know if you get into that, but I saw one in 71 and 95, and they were standing at the foot of my bed, and I woke up and I felt the energy, and I saw 5'6", 5'7", is a feminine. I think it was a lady, and she had a veil over her face and just stood there and looked at me, and I was looking at her, and then she slowly turned and walked away into another room, and I followed her, and she was gone. And that happened just exactly the same way both times. And so I kind of think that's a guardian angel. You're talking about ghost. I
Or
don't.
it could be a ghost.
Yeah.
So this has been my experience. Okay, if you have an attached entity, and well, let's just not even go there because that's a whole other conversation. Let's just keep it simple. Ghosts.
Yeah.
So ghosts are usually tied to a location. And so like I have two ghosts that live at my house. I have John and I have this woman who likes to like make noises, which creeps me out, and move my stuff,
Yeah.
which pisses me off. And and so if you go into a location, and I don't ever see ghosts with my physical eyes, it's more that intuitive eye. Um, and so most people just kind of blow it off. Um, and when I go into a location, I go in looking, but really I go in more feeling. And I'll walk around and see this might work for you because you're a feeler. And
Mhm.
I will walk around and kind of wave my hands around in front of me and just kind of hold them up. And when I feel the energy shift, then I'll stop or I'll walk past it till I feel it shift back to how it was. And I'll go and I'll isolate that area and then look because now I've kind of said, okay, there's something here. So what is this? Because I think my feeling sense, especially when I don't know what's going on, is stronger um, than just, I mean, sometimes I just see them, like whatever. But again, it's not out of my physical eyes, it's in my intuitive eye, if that makes sense to you. Like it's in my mind's eye, and it's like, oh, there's some angry man over there. Or
Yeah.
um
No, what basically are ghosts? I mean, are they stuck in purgatory? Are they stuck in this level, this dimension, and they don't want to leave? You said that they like staying around places they're familiar with, but why don't they like? I've heard people say when they go and they try to tell a ghost to go to the light. I would think, wouldn't they know to go to the light? I mean, that's something like a god with big G, a divine that would actually show them, to go to the light when you die. And what is a ghost? I mean, that's a thing that I
so I mean, I just say that, like they're invisible dead people. Let's just keep it simple. But when you interact with ghosts, there's actually different things. Sometimes you interact with ghosts that um, don't want to go to the light. They were nasty in life and they are nasty after death and they're afraid of where they're going to end up. And so they just end up walking the earth, you know, and many times those will become the attached entities. They're nasty. I don't like those ones. Then there are ones that just kind of hang out in a location. A lot of the times, those ghosts are residual energy ghosts, which means they've imprinted their energy on a location, but there's not actually a physical presence there. So you can go somewhere and see, like this friend of mine he lives in a place called the Grove in Jefferson, Texas, and it is like one of the most haunted houses in the country. And I went there and I identified like 15 anomalies in his house. I mean, it was just like everywhere. There was some crap going on.
Oh, busy
And
house.
busy house, busy. And so, like, if you look in their dining room, you see this woman that comes out of the kitchen and goes into the dining room and goes to the fireplace because obviously it was a cooking fireplace. And you just see her make this same loop over and over and over again. She doesn't pay any attention to you, and she's a very residual ghost, but she's there and she ain't going nowhere but she's residual. A much smaller percentage are active hauntings, much smaller percentage. Um, where there actually is a consciousness and a presence. But then there's another kind that often gets bad press. So the way I like to look at it is, when you die, from what I understand, because none of us have died and come back and shared our story. I mean, you have your life review process, and said simply, this is naturally what I believe. You go to heaven, and there are a lot of people that I am so bad. No mean letters for how I say this. Yeah, but there are people that believe that once you go to heaven, you're freaking locked up there and you can't ever leave. And you're stuck in heaven, and your daughter just had a baby, and you're stuck in heaven and you can't come visit. Well, that's not the case. A lot of the times you'll go and the person has a new baby, or they're in the process of getting married, or there's some kind of life event. Grandma is dying, but now they have this activity going on. It's because it's grandpa
Yeah.
coming to be with grandma. It is not that he was stuck in the house, it's because he's not locked up in freaking heaven.
And kids can see these entities better than we can. I guess they're tuned in to the supernatural when you're younger. I guess I they show themselves more. Can a ghost materialize, Rita?
That's what I've heard. I have never had one materialize. I from to me, like the shadow entities
Mm-hmm.
tend to be the most annoying and perceptible, because you just see this like shadow out of the corner of your eye and you look and there's nothing there. But, I had one that lived in my backyard. I called him Tom. And and where it started getting weird was when my husband was like, is there something in our yard? I'm like, yeah, it's Tom. Then the kids started noticing Tom. And so we all were like, okay with Tom, but then we would have company, and inevitably somebody would pull me to the side and they'd be like, there's somebody in your backyard. And I'm like, oh yeah, it's Tom.
Your husband didn't get any ideas, did he? I mean, Tom kind of sneaking around your house or whatever.
No, because he was seeing him.
Okay.
I mean, he was just a shadow spirit. And he's like going, I don't even understand what's going on. And, but I was like, oh, it's just Tom.
Yeah. Is that the slender man they call it? The kids see the tall, slender man. It's the same thing as a shadow person, Dr. Rita.
I don't know. I mean, because, not there's not just one shadow spirit.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? I mean, like Tom lived in my yard. I've been to other places where they had their own shadow spirit, and you can't really sit there and identify what they look like because every time you look, they're gone.
Mhm. Now, you talk about ETs, and I know ETs can also be invisible. And
Mm-hmm,
I think we have the technology to be invisible too. I think
mm-hmm.
our scientists underground or whatever. I don't want to get into that because I can tell you a few things. that I've been a little scared a few times on certain people following or whatever, and they get interested in what you're talking about. I don't want to get too much into that, but they it seems like there's people that are hiding things, and I heard that art scientists and people in, in places to be the higher ups or whatever, they have a lot of this technology from ETs, and that's
Mhm.
probably why they don't want disclosure, because they don't want us to know what they know if the ETs actually give a face-to-face disclosure. I don't know. You think there'll ever be disclosure, Dr. Rita?
I mean, I think it's interesting because I think, if asked, the vast majority of people either believe in ETs or are cognizant of the distinct possibilities that ETs exist and wouldn't go running down the street and get hit by a car because they, found out that ETs exist. You know, so in myth, there were periods of time where the gods would come and imbue humanity with information. The gods taught us how to sow crops and how to weave and how to do metallurgy. But if you look at the timeline, they're thousands of years apart. And so, in the Sumerian text, it says that the gods came to the earth to teach humanity 3 times before the flood and 3 times after the flood. And you can actually see these spikes in new technology. Like we go from like not really anything, and then we have writing and culture, and we're building cities. I mean, this huge spike. But things have really changed a lot, societal wise, and technology wise. And I don't remember who suggested this, but they suggested this to me a long, long time ago, and I think it was in one of my shows, was that the gods aren't coming down and going, "Hey, Rita, I'm going to teach you this information," which is kind of what they did before. They would have their specific individuals that they would educate, or small groups. It suggests that they just are dumping, they're just leaving a crap for us.
Mhm.
And that's how they're educating us, not by them interacting with us, but by leaving us, I'm going to say, pretty hardcore clues.
Little droppings on the way, yeah. Uh,
Here, like we'll give them this, it's old. Yeah.
Now, I've never had them give me any technology. I've been asked that, what have you seen? I've seen a few little things that I think, how they erase your memory through bright light, and it's a tube, and they run it up and down your face. I've seen that, and I've seen how they extract semen. I've seen the hose, and I've seen an apparatus, but I haven't been shown any technology, even with most of the things that I've been through, and that kind of pisses me off. Yeah, but I'd like for them to tell me something. That's the thing. You have talked to Shirley MacLaine, Dr. Rita. You've talked to her.
Mhm.
Yeah, you had a radio show with her or whatever.
I interviewed her. I know I was on her show because it was pretty classic. Yeah, I was on her show actually because she had a show a million years ago.
Okay.
And God, I haven't even thought about that in a super long time. And
Well, I had a friend of hers, her best friend. I can't think of her name. Darn it. She was on my show a couple of months ago, and we talked about her friendship with Shirley MacLaine. Shirley is 93, I think now, 94,
mhm.
and she's now doing another movie, and that's miraculous. But she talked about her relationship with Shirley MacLaine. I can't. I'll think of her name. Maybe I have to look back on my records, but I got everything all spread out here. But that was pretty nice talking to somebody that knew Shirley MacLaine. What did you talk about, Dr. Rita, when you talked to Shirley MacLaine?
That was like a gajillion years ago. I do remember one thing that totally stands out in my mind. So we had this whole conversation, bit of a debate about free will. because she said, well, we have free will, we can choose what we want to do. And my response to her, which is where the debate came from, it's like, well, we can always choose, or we can choose to listen and things will be good, or we can choose to not listen and get whacked up the side of the head.
Hmm.
She didn't like my answer. And it's like, but that's been my experience. It's like, you can do where you're being led by spirit, or by your intuition, or what feels right or feels whole or feels congruent, or you can allow your ego to choose, which is usually never the path to salvation. How's that?
Yeah, I see people like in religions, they pray and they pray, and I pray, of course, every day, meditate and pray. So, a lot of times you don't see it coming to fruition. It's like when somebody's meant to die and it's their time to go, they're going to go. I don't know how much I prayed for my relatives, and I keep thinking, boy, that was a waste of time. They passed away, and everybody's prayers didn't work. So I guess when you are summoned by the big G, God, that your time is done, and no amount of praying or wishful thinking from your loved ones are going to do you any good. Is that how you get it too, Dr. Rita?
So I've actually worked with quite a number of people. I'll say people, but it's usually the children of the person who is dying.
Mhm.
And they'll contact me because they want me to do energy work on them, because their hope is that the person will get better. And I'll look briefly and go, okay, so here's the deal. It's like, they're in pretty bad shape, and I'm happy to do energy work on them, but there's two potential outcomes. I go, one potential outcome is they'll get better. It's a potential outcome. I go, but the other potential outcome, which is the one that I tend to see more of, is that the energy work will help them let go of the emotional energy that's keeping them bound to the earth, and they'll transition, and usually like within a couple of days. And then you kind of feel a little like a murderer, you know. And but now I preface it so I don't feel as bad.
Okay.
And so I've had people, not that they want to kill their mom, but they can see that they're just hanging on, and they want them to go peacefully. And but what I've seen with people, because I get that question a lot, is, because their parent is not well, and I can't say they're going to die on November 3rd. I mean, I can't do that because I don't know. But what I can detect is, have they made the decision yet? Because every single person in this, whether there's a consciousness to it or a subconsciousness to it, I don't really know because I've never talked to the person. Um, they will make the internal decision that they can go, and it's okay for them to go. And usually within weeks of that decision, they're gone.
I heard 2 weeks. A person knows they're going to die 2 weeks ahead of time, and of course, the day of their death. Uh, I've seen a couple of relatives do the same thing, and we knew exactly when they were going to go, almost from what the doctor was saying. And a lot of times, I had two relatives that wouldn't pass away while we were there. It was only when the room was empty they passed away, and
Mm-hmm.
a nurse would have to call us and say, "Your sister passed away at such and such time. Would you come and come to the hospital?" And I thought, well, we just had guests or some relatives just leave the room, and about an hour later she decided to die. So yeah, I guess we do have choice on that, and we do know when we're going to go. uh getting
But usually, there's a decision that is made, and sometimes it takes a while, sometimes it's short. But I'll share this story. I mean, I have some really good transition stories, but like my dad um, had a stroke and was basically paralyzed. He was paralyzed. And so I had gone home, and uh, my sister and I decided that we would stay in the room because my mom was partially disabled, and we would just stay in the room with them.
Mhm.
And So my sister was sleeping on the floor. I think I don't know where she was sleeping. I slept on the floor the night before, and I got the recliner chair. And and I must have nodded off, just briefly.
Mhm.
And the next thing I know is, like, in my dream, kind of, my grandmother, my grandfather, and my great grandmother are all there with me. And then I woke up and I was like, holy shit,
Hey,
he's gone.
yeah,
He's gone. I mean, because they showed up, and I maybe been sleeping 20 minutes.
yeah. What? Yeah, I mentioned. I know you work within spiritual healing. What exactly is spiritual healing, and how do you start with it, and how do you? What is your goal when you start with a person with spiritual healing? And I'm just curious on how you do this. I mean, Dr. Rita.
So energy healing is all about intention, and, to me, visualization. Uh, but it is about helping the person to have their body align so that their subtle energy can flow through them more correctly. And it gives them the opportunity to let go and release the negative or discordant energy inside of them.
Mhm.
And it's, because as human beings, in addition to sending and receiving energy, we can also mirror energy. So if somebody's in a good mood, they say that it can be contagious, and the
Yes.
same as if they're in a bad mood. So if I'm doing energy work on you and I'm helping to clear this area, my energy is also shifting. And now we're in resonance. And so as this whole exchange happens, the vibration increases, giving them more permission to let go of whatever they've been holding on to.
Is it
I
kind
think
of
I'm
a
getting a little
frequent?
tired.
It is a frequency type of thing that we're
Yes.
referring to each
Yeah,
other.
that's a great way of putting it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because
Yes.
I do the same thing. I feel people's frequencies if they're low or high.
Mhm.
Usually a high frequency person is perky and has a sense of humor like you. I mean, you must be a high frequency person, because you have that jolly, that joy inside a lot of times, and I can sense it. And it's it's like we was talking about ghosts a while ago, and I thought, well, the only ghost I ever see is when I open up my wallet. That's a ghost. But
Mhm.
no. Uh, I I'm curious, and I think that's what happens to people like us that are curious, and things have happened to us to lead us to certain things. It's like I'd like doing the podcast to enlighten people. You don't get rich writing UFO books and doing podcasts. There's no big money in it all.
But
Uh,
there's a joy in it, and
yeah,
a satisfaction,
yeah.
because they told me to. I mean, that's really, like, okay, yeah, I'll take care of that now.
Okay, what now? Let's talk about you believe it.
Okay, but I think I need to. I'm starting to get, like, really tired, and I think my air conditioner broke
Oh no.
because it's hot in
Uh,
here.
Well, it is getting up to that hour and a half level. So yeah, I was just going to start winding down. Say something really quick about your new book, Dang.
Oh
It
yeah, we didn't even get there, did we? Well, actually, we did kind of talk about it.
did.
So my new book, Dang, It Was Me All Along, is all about becoming aware of what's going on inside of you, because so many of us are unappreciative of the amount of negative commentary happening inside. And 80% of our thinking is negative,
Mhm.
unless you do something conscious to change that. And when I mean, there's a whole backstory, but I wrote this book because I wasn't happy, and that's what I wanted. That was my goal, was what do I need to do to have more days that I'm happy than kind of being annoyed by my own negative thinking.
Right.
And it was my journey of, can you bring happiness into your life? Is that something that you can do Or are you just like, this is the person I am, and this is what I'm stuck with for the rest of my life? I mean, that was the question. And I learned early on that you can change it. And so the book is not a memoir, even though I do share stories, for example, but it's really about the most common comment on the reviews on Amazon have been, it's like talking to your neighbor about a topic, or it's like having a conversation with your best friend, because it is very much written in my voice. I'm extremely frank. And I just am like, okay, well, I tried this and it totally didn't work. But something I gleaned out of this was really effective. And if you apply it this way, and so it just tries to take the mystery out of who we are and kind of put it out there so that you can go, oh, I do that all the time. Why am I doing that? And what do I need to do to change that? Because I don't like that behavior. I don't like how I respond to things or whatever. And so it's really about raising our awareness of what's going inside, because once your awareness is raised, and if you find stuff you don't like, you know what I've discovered? You don't like it long enough, you're going to change it.
Yes, that's true. And you can't have happiness through somebody else. You can't
Correct.
depend on other people to make you happy. You have to do it yourself. It's an internal thing. It's just like God is internal in us, all, each of us, and we don't have to go outside to reach him. He's right here with us inside.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I really enjoyed talking. Yeah, we got that subject you're talking about, the with the ETs and all this other stuff, that we can probably do another show on. And yeah, I can feel, that when you talk about these types of the subjects and topics, they can get really deep, and they can get off, off on different.
They're whole books.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you got quite a few books, and I will list that in the narrative when I put the show out. So I will do that, and also the names of your book and the dang book. I'll put that out there, and your website, and I think I have all that information on these pages. And you,
Oh, and one last thing, if I can share my last plug.
okay,
On Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Central. So Thursday night, 7 p.m., I do a live stream called Thursday Night Live with Dr. Rita Louise, which is me.
yeah,
And people can join in the chat. And I do kind of opening comments, like I talked about vaccine lettuce a couple of weeks ago. This week was about healing. I've talked about gaslighting. I mean, just a wide variety of topics. And then you can get a free on-air reading. So if you want to listen, it gets posted on like Rumble, BitChute, YouTube, Facebook. But if you want to join the conversation, the easiest way to get access to the chat is by going to YouTube. I know YouTube. Um, but by going to Just Energy Radio, so that's Just Energy Radio, 3 words, on Thursday night at 7 p.m. Central, hit that live button and you'll be able to join the conversation and get a free on air reading and hang out with me,
wow,
which is
that'd be great.
fun.
I'd like, yeah, I might call in and get a reading. I noticed that also you have a list of so many shows. You've been on CBS Evening News, CBS Radio Network, Coast to Coast, Ancient Aliens. So you have been around. I mean, you have made the tour. I'm telling you, great. I think that's great. I mean, you're really getting the word out there. I appreciate the enlightenment you're giving people and the hope that you're giving people also. Dr. Rita Louise, thank you so much for being on the show. And I want to thank everybody for joining in. This is Dave Emmons and the Strange Reality Show. And we'll have this show out in about 2 or 3 days. I will get that out with a narrative, and Dr. Rita Louise, you've been exciting and funny, and it's just, and I guess your air conditioner is making you hot now, so okay.
Well, and I know I turned it on. I only have window units and I know I turned it on. I'm like, I'm not hearing it. And
Oh
it's a
no.
giant,
Yeah,
giant,
yeah.
ancient unit. And I'm like, oh, don't break, because that's like $1,000 unit to replace.
Oh, they're expensive, these things nowadays. Well, Dr. Rita Louise, thank you so much for being on the show, and we're going to say good night to everybody, and bye bye. Thank you.